Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's 12:02. We'll get going in the interest of time. Just a couple housekeeping things. Just want to make sure everyone knows they can use the Q&A function for questions, and we'll try to answer them during the presentation. But everything will be answered in an FAQ after the presentation, as well as recording and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be sent to everyone after the webinar and available on our website. So again, thank you for joining. I'm Jen Cummings. I'm the Director of Business at the Finance Authority of Maine, and also introducing Laura Rigby, who is our Program Manager for the Thrive Maine program. So we're really thrilled to have you here today in the second of our 2 webinar series. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on what the application is going to look like, the application portal, how to get in there and apply. But before we get into that, we're going to do a quick review of the program, as well as go into some common questions that we got when we went over the program details in the first webinar. So we did kind of try to jumble everything together that seemed to be high theme questions that we were getting in the last webinar. So the 3 top of those will go over the other pandemic relief funding, what qualifies and what doesn't, loss impact categories, and the UEI concerns that we're hearing from a lot of folks. And then we'll go into the application portal and show you what that will look like, getting username and password, kind of the 2-factor authentication, and go through the application fields that you'll be required to fill out so that you can be sure to be prepared. And we did get a lot of great questions in the last webinar, so keep them coming and we'll do our best to answer those as we go today. But anything we can't get to, we will make sure to answer and get out in a Word document after the webinar. So Thrive and Grow Maine are 2 programs we're kind of launching side by side. Today's presentation is focused on Thrive Maine, which is backward facing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We do have $58 million for this program, and all falling under the American Rescue Plan Act. The Grow Maine program, which we're in the process of launching as well, is $62 million allocated to growing or expanding existing companies in the state of Maine. So just some quick facts as we recap the Thrive Maine program. They are going to be in the forms of forgivable loans to address impacts felt of the pandemic. They are at a minimum $10,000 and at a maximum $2 million. The forgiveness requirements to earn the 25% forgiveness in each of 4 years. So once the loans originated, 1 year after that, the loan would be 25% forgiven each year for 4 years. And the only requirement to earn that forgiveness is that the company is still operational in the state of Maine. You will be given an annual certification that you'll have to sign and send back to us. And with that certification, that'll generate the taxable income event that occurs with the 25% forgiveness on an annual basis for 4 years. The allocations are only made to small Maine businesses. So the kicker for the small Maine business has to be under 500 employees, and there is no revenue caps for nonprofits. I did see that question in the chat as we were going through, just waiting for the webinar to start. So that has to be under 500 employees. The money is on a first come, first served basis. The first round will open Tuesday, October 4th at 9 a.m. So get your applications in then. I did have some questions earlier come through also about the size of the round. So this round that's opening October 4th is going to be $29 million. So half of that 58 million. The second round will open up at some point in 2023. As we go through the application, you're going to have to choose from one of three categories to best describe the loss experience your company felt. So the three loss experiences are loss of Ebitda, and we're using 2019 as a base year. And Laura will go into more detail on that a little further into the presentation. If there was an extraordinary event in 2019, you also have the option of using 2018 as a baseline year if 2019 was kind of an extraordinary year for your company. The second is expenses incurred, and the third is increased capital project costs versus a prior quoted project. This would be that secondary quote, and the delta between the two would be that forgivable loan amount. So just kind of diving into the FAQs, the questions we received after the last webinar obviously need a little more detail around a few certain things. So this is in regards to double dipping. We are going to be asking about previous pandemic relief funds that your company received. So you can't ask for this Thrive forgivable loan to cover any impacts you've already addressed by other state or federal grants or forgiven funds. So an example of this would be the PPP loan. The pandemic relief loans that you need to pay back are not considered double dipping in the form of the Thrive forgivable loan. And this example would be the economic injury disaster loan, or EIDL. So anything that's considered double dipping, we would take out of the calculation. And we'll go into this a little further actually on the next slide. So when we're looking at two calculation methods, so if you obviously have the choice to include the PPP as in this example, we're including it as an other revenue source in your when we're talking about a P&L. So if your company included other revenue of the PPP funding in this example, we're seeing that the $20 was included in other revenue, bringing the total revenue of the company to $120 less expenses. The Ebitda would be $10, comparing to the 2019 Ebitda of $50. So we're going to use that delta to get a $40 forgivable loan qualification. If the PPP funding in scenario 2 was not included in other revenue, then we would subtract it out of the end, out of the calculation at the end. So we'd just be comparing 2020 Ebitda to 2019 Ebitda, that baseline year of $50, and then taking the PPP out. So depending on whether or not your company included the PPP in revenue or outside of revenue is going to be dependent on how you're going to submit that calculation. We also are going to be providing templates for you to use that Laura will go over in a few minutes to try to simplify the calculation for you and provide you with an Excel sheet that you can use with some corresponding data elements that you're able to submit with your uploaded documents in the application to try to simplify it for you. So we provide on the next slide some examples of things that similar to PPP would be taken out of that calculation. Again, these are all things that are grants or forgivable funds, things that you're not having to pay back. And these aren't obviously not limited to. So federal and state pandemic relief funding are okay to be included in the forgivable amount, but they're not considered double dipping. So an example of that would be any SBA funds that aren't tied to pandemic relief, and the economic disaster loan that has to be paid back. Those are not considered double dipping. So every pandemic relief fund that your company received should be listed in your application. There is a text box that asks what you received, how much you received, the date you received it, and if or not it was forgiven. So you will have the option to explain that, but we do need to know about it. So make sure you're transparent. Not everything needs to be removed, as we just went over, from the requested loan amount, but we do need to know about them. So we do feel like we went through each of the 3 loss categories, and the loss of Ebitda, most likely all relief funds that you received will reduce the potential loan amount size, since they all essentially will impact that P&L. The latter 2 categories are likely less, are more specific to actually what you're asking for. So it's a good chance that only certain pandemic reliefs would reduce the potential loan amount in the latter 2 categories, because they're more specific to projects or specific expenses, as opposed to being more general in the Ebitda category. So again, you are going to have to choose one of the 3 categories when you go into the application, and then the documents required are provided for you for each loss experience to tell you what you're required to do, as well as that that calculation sheet that Laura will go over for each of the 3 categories. So the last kind of themed question or concern that we were hearing from everyone was around the unique entity identifier, and this is the number that's required from Treasury to receive any ARPA funds, which is the part of the Thrive program. So we do have to get this number before we provide any funds to any recipient of funding. So we did kind of come into this saying that we have to have the number before we accept the application. We did hear a lot of feedback from people that they were having a lot of trouble getting into the system and getting their number. So we heard you, we made a tweak to our application. So you are able to apply if you have, able to apply for Thrive forgivable loan if you've applied for your UEI number and have not yet received it. We are going to require that you submit that your pending status with sam.gov. So a screenshot of your application and or a screenshot of your pending status is sufficient. The eligible loans, so if you get an approval and you don't have your UEI number, that's okay. You will have to put in your tax ID number into the portal though for the application, so just be prepared for that. The eligible loan, if it's approved, will be reserved. The funds will be reserved and held until the UEI is provided to FAME. So you will, once you do receive your UEI number, you can go back into the application and input it into the system, and it'll prompt the funds to then be released to you as the approved loan recipient. There is a deadline on this. If you don't have the UEI number by December 3rd, no money will be awarded. So that's the date that the application cycle is closing. So we won't be accepting the UEI number after that time. So we are giving a little more flexibility here. We're not saying it's a hard stop if you don't have that UEI number, but we do want to allow people to apply if they've if they're in the process of obtaining that UEI number. We did provide some resources in the first webinar if you're having trouble finding that or getting through that process. So you can find that information on our website and go into that first webinar and get those resources, try to help you through that process. We do understand it's challenging, and we're trying to provide some tweaks here to help you get through the process. But just make sure you include that screenshot of the pending status and that you have applied in the documents that you upload in the application. There is reminders in the application to include that pending status if you don't have your actual UEI number yet, but you have to have applied for it. So with that, we'll go into the actual application portal, and Laura's going to bring us through that today.
All right, so so in the next portion, we're going to talk about the application. We're going to talk about the application portal. We're going to talk about the actual questions that we're going to ask you and how you can make the best application possible. So this is the website. We've created a new portal that holds your application. This website exists already, but you are not able to log in yet. We have disabled the functionality for you to create a new username. That will open up on October 4th at 9 a.m. You can get to this website through a link on our website, or you can go directly to this site, mainelending.org. So on October 4th at 9 a.m., what you're going to do is you'll press this Apply Now button down at the bottom on the Thrive Maine program description, which will then bring you to more details, a full list out of what the program is and what you're going to be asked to do. To jump into it, you press that Begin Application button, which will prompt you to create an account. This is all the normal stuff. You're going to be asked for your name, your email, create a password. The password, this is all written on the page too. I know the font is really small. You probably can't see it, but password needs to be at least 12 characters. And security is obviously really important to us. You're going to be submitting financial information about your company. So we have two-factor authentication every single time you log in. What that means is that you're going to be emailed with this 6-digit number that you'll then have to put into the website. I feel totally confident showing you this one-time security code from 3 weeks ago, because that number is only good for about 10 minutes and then it becomes invalid. So what you'll do is you'll take that 9-digit number and put it into that email TFA, which stands for two-factor authentication security code, and press verify. And then you'll be into the application and you can actually get started. But this is an important part of setting up your account. Two things before we really jump into the questions that I think are really important for everyone to know. First is that you can save your application and come back to it before submitting. You don't have to sit down in one sitting and go through it all. I am someone who works best in kind of creating a document and then walking away for 20 minutes or a night or something and coming back with fresh eyes to review. That's totally possible here because we have your account and the two-factor authentication security. You can come back before submitting. The second point is that example applications are going to be on the website tomorrow. So we've got an example application, one for each category, and we're going to be going over big kind of narrative questions today and talking through general, what can you do to make your application strong? We're going to list out every single question that you're going to get, even the nitty gritty small stuff like what's your address and what's your date of incorporation, all those little bits. You're going to be able to see every single one of them tomorrow on the website. They'll be up there for you to peruse. Okay, so when you're actually in the application, this tracker is going to be at the top of every single page. It shows you where you are in the application and it helps you see your progress. So there are 6 different sections to the Thrive Maine forgivable loan application. First is the applicant contact and business information. Second is employee and demographic information. That's your basic information about the company. Next is where you're going to write the narratives. It's the pandemic impact. It's where you write down about how your business was impacted and what you are applying to reimburse or get qualified for the loan. The 4th section is where you're going to upload all of the proof. So we're going to be asking for a number of documents to prove what you're saying in your narratives. All those should align, but that 4th section is where you upload stuff. The 5th section is where you're going to put bank account information. We need this because if you do receive a loan, you'll get that as a direct deposit. And so we need to know where to send that money to, which is why we are asking for your bank account information. I will note that bank account information, we have a highly secure site. And even within the site, there are only a handful of people that can even see your bank account information. The general reviewer does not have access to your information. So we've got several layers of security measures in place. And then that last section is where you review and submit before it's all set up to be looked at and scored. Today, we're going to focus on this middle section. Again, talking through the questions, talking through the proof. What do you need to really create a good application that highlights what we're looking for? And there are 3 different categories. Jen said them earlier. Based on which category that you apply for, you're going to get slightly different questions. Again, the 3 categories are loss of Ebitda or cash flow versus pre-pandemic. So the default is 2019. The second category is pandemic expenses incurred. And the third category is increase in capital project costs versus a preliminary quote. We are going to start with what are the questions we're going to ask you about loss of Ebitda, which again is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And if you're totally lost on what that is, I would recommend you go to the first webinar and watch that, or do some Googling. There's tons of information, or ask an accountant or bookkeeper. They'll know what this is. It's operational profit, kind of operational cash flow. It is not just revenue. It encapsulates both revenue and expenses for your business in one metric. Okay. So these are the questions that we're going to ask you, narrative questions that we're going to ask you for you to describe the loss of Ebitda for your company or organization. First is just generally, how was your company impacted by the pandemic? And the second question is very similar, right? You're telling us that you lost some operational profit, operational cash flow. Why? What happened? This is your space to be specific. You should tell us things like, we lost revenue because we had to close for 4 months. And then when we were able to open in July, because of health code regulations, we could only have 50% of our usual traffic come through. And then for expenses, they went up because of boom, boom, boom. Tell me details, give us precise dollar amounts, percentages, be specific here and tie it directly to your financials. We are going to look between this narrative and your financials. Everything should match up. It should make sense from your words and your numbers. And that is what we're looking for. The third question is are you comparing to 2019 financials? I saw some questions in the Q&A already. There is an opportunity to compare to 2018 if 2019 is truly bizarre. The default is that you're comparing to the full year prior to the pandemic, so 2019. If for some reason 2019 was absolutely unique and will never happen again, and you can explain why it was unique, and not just unique in like a quirky little way, like a unique, and it totally blew up your financials and everything looks totally different, and you can prove it, you can compare your 2020 or 2021 Ebitda versus 2018. The default is 2019. And if you don't explain why 2019 was so strange and extenuating circumstances, we will compare versus 2019. But this question is asking it so that you can provide those details. This is where you make your case that 2019 is not a good base year because, I don't know, because of something very bizarre. If, for example, regulations changed in 2019 and 2018 just looks more favorable, that's not acceptable. It has to be really unique. It has to be something that won't be repeated again. And if that's the case, then you could explain it there. This last question is, we actually have it on every single category. This is your space. If you feel like you weren't able to make your case or you want to tell us something else, this is your space to do it. This last question is optional. You can put something there if you'd like, to really explain what you think is relevant to the reviewer. To help with your calculation, we are providing as well a template to help calculate what is Ebitda and what are the comparison points. So across the top, we've got 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. If you're not using 2018, great, ignore that column. The different rows are how we are calculating your Ebitda, and the blue cells throughout the Excel document are calculated for you. They've got the equations already in there, so you don't need to touch them. So this sheet is optional, but you can also use it for your benefit. It's suggested, encouraged, recommended, all of those words. We will be using your taxes as the source of truth. So for businesses, check out your Schedule M1 to figure out what all these numbers are. For sole proprietors, Schedule C. For nonprofits, your Part 1, set 8. You can see I don't like Roman numerals that much, but Part 8 and 9. You can fill out this document. If for some reason you are using fiscal instead of calendar, you can do that too. Obviously, your taxes won't be a true reflection of what you're applying for. Your job will then be to help us bridge between your financials that you're providing and your taxes, because you still need to include all of those. And we will be cross-referencing them. We will be confirming across. Your job will be to help us reconcile between your taxes and your financials. And perhaps you can do that in the fourth question box for the category. Again, this sheet is optional, but really suggested to help you think through how you're calculating those and how the 2020 or 2021 are compared to 2019. For the Ebitda category, these are the documents that you're going to have to upload. And this list will become more familiar as you go through the other two categories. But we require 2 forms of ID, income statements for 2019 through 2022. Obviously, 2022 is going to be year to date. We're going to need a 2022 year-to-date balance sheet, taxes from 2019 through 2021. If you have filed an extension and haven't yet filed your taxes for 2021, that's okay. You don't have to upload taxes that you haven't submitted yet. If you are using 2018 as a comparison, we need the same information for 2018. So income statements and taxes as well. You do not get to just skip over 2019 though. You need to add that on top of or including 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22 information. Optional in this category is that Ebitda calculation template, again, highly recommended. And then you either need, as Jen mentioned, you either need the UEI number that you'll put in the application or that screenshot proof of pending status. Okay, second category, pandemic expenses incurred. This category is all about the safety, the COVID safety of your customers and your employees. So the questions we're going to ask you are all about that. The first one, how was your company impacted by the pandemic? Every organization is going to be impacted slightly differently, and that is going to influence what you needed to do to keep people safe from it. And that second question there is what's really important here. This is where you make your case about every single expense as to why it was directly linked to keeping employees and customers safe and healthy from COVID-19. You need to truly every single expense down. If you apply for one expense that was $5, you need to explain to us why you spent it, why it was directly connected to the safety of people surrounding your business. Every single one should be listed out, explain what it is, explain the connection. That is the meat of your application here. And if you are not explaining one expense well enough, or that direct line between COVID safety and this expense, if that direct line wasn't created, we're not going to be able to reimburse you for it. So this is really where you should spend your energy to make sure that all of your expenses are able to be reimbursed. And then that third question is what else do you have to tell us from the same? So you can add whatever you feel is relevant here. We've got a template for you for this category. This is going to help you organize your receipts and your expenses incurred. And it also will help us on the back end to review and make sure that we're understanding everything and we've got everything. You're going to fill out every single line. What is the expense? What is the proof? And then your job as well is to make sure that you're uploading that signed invoice or receipt or contract, proof that every expense was paid or committed to be spent by December of 2024. This is not something that you're thinking about spending. This is stuff that you've already committed to before you apply. The blue box at the bottom of this will be an automatic sum. So it'll just be a helpful check and it'll help us keep organized on both sides, both the applicant and reviewer sides, to make sure that we're getting everything. For this category, the required uploads are very similar. 2 forms of ID, income statements from 2019 to 2022, balance sheet year to date, taxes from 2019 to 21, every single receipt, invoice, contract for the expense that you're applying for. If you don't have the proof, it won't be reimbursed. If you don't have the explanation of why it is directly linked to COVID safety, it won't be reimbursed. You got to have both of those pieces for every single expense. And then the last, you need either the UEI number or the proof of pending status. Okay, last category. This is the increased capital project cost. And remember, this is all about, you got a first quote, excuse me, you got a first quote, and then you went and did it. And this is, and the cost of this capital project outside of your normal business operations, this capital project was $20,000 more expensive than your initial quote. And you can apply for that then $20,000 for a forgivable loan. Here, we're going to be asking you about this project. We're going to be asking you about your company in general. How was it impacted by the pandemic? Same question as before. And then we're going to get into the capital project. Why was it necessary? I want to point out here the verb tense of why it was necessary. This is not something that you are looking forward to. This is not future dreams of a big capital project you want to do. This is something that was either spent and done already, or you have a signed contract and you've already committed to it. So explain to us what your capital project was and why it was necessary for the business. The third question here, you're going to explain why in my example, from the initial quote to the actually spent project, why did it increase $20,000? And the big job here is to prove that it's the same, it's an apples to apples comparison. If your scope increased and you decided that your new building needed to have 4 more rooms, great, but you can't apply for the additional cost through this category. So in this category, you need to explain why did that capital project cost increase $20,000? And it was due to these reasons, and be specific. Again, really break it down, be precise, exact dollars. What are you hearing from the vendors? Why is it increasing? And prove that it's the same project that you're completing versus that original quote. And again, that bottom question is space for you to give us anything else that you feel is relevant so that you can really give a clear indication of what this application is going for. We also have a template for this one. This one is required. I broke this one up because it's just a little bit longer. And so for our PowerPoint slide, it looks a little bit different. But what it is you're going to write out all of the expenses from the first quote, from the initial quote, and also from the committed or spent project. And it'll sum up and create an automatic increase between the committed and spent and the initial quote to show you what you could apply for. Again, you need to write down every single thing, prove every single expense with a quote, a receipt, a paid invoice, a contract. This is a required form. It's also for organization, again, for the applicant and for the reviewer. Make sure that you're uploading proof of every single expense so that we can check it off, and we truly will be checking it off. We'll be going to your uploaded documents, check, okay, they had this one, check, okay, they had this one. Make sure to give us details, make sure to give us proof. The uploaded documents for these are very similar to forms of ID, income statements for 19 through 22, balance sheet for 22, taxes for 19 through 21. Every receipt, invoice, contract, everything that's listed on that template, you need to be uploading. And again, the UEI or proof of pending status. Okay, overall tips. Give us all the information and the proof. The more, the better here, truly. We really value transparency. So if you think something could be relevant, tell us. Give us the expense, give us the proof. We want to be able to see it. Something here, we know that there have been a lot of pandemic funding programs. If you're questioning whether something is on the include, or maybe you think it's on the, oh, it doesn't impact the amount that I can apply for, we still want you to write it down and tell us about it. We have a couple other venues we'll be checking about what type of pandemic funds you've received. It's way better if you are telling us about it than we find out about it and then do some more digging as well. Just to make sure that we are trusting everything. Also, please review before submitting. What you submit is what will be scored. We are not allowing additional edits. We cannot allow additional edits after you press that submit button. So it's really important that you feel confident before you press that submit button. Don't press submit and then try and email, oh, I forgot this thing and this and this. It won't be considered in your application. And even though this is first come, first serve, it's worth that extra 20-30 minute review to make sure you've got everything and your case is made really strongly. Because incomplete or unproven applications won't be processed. So if you don't add the tax returns or the financials or the expenses, it's not going to, your application could be just denied straight away. Things like we've seen, if some of your financials have a password protection on them, we can't get into them. So it's basically like they're not there for us. So please don't put a password on your financials. or your taxes or these other documents. If you must, it's on you to put the password in the application in a place that is very easy for us to find. Otherwise, we will be rejecting it like those documents aren't attached. So again, this is another reason why we really highly suggest that you go through and read that application, double check that you've uploaded all the documents you need, because incomplete or unproven applications are not going to be processed. You'll be able to apply again, but because this is a first come, first serve program, you'll lose your spot in line and you'll be, at the bottom of the line again and potentially miss out on funding opportunities. So, key takeaways for everyone. First, get ready now. Apply for your UBI. We know that it is taking a lot of people, it is taking a long time for the government to go through these applications. And like Jen said, if you don't have your number by December 3rd, we're not funding even the best of applications. And that could feel like a really long time away, but if you talk to some other businesses that have been trying to get this UEI, it can take a really long time. So truly apply for your UEI now. If you have questions on it, you can look at the other webinar. We've got other resources to help you to apply for it and gather your materials right now. Second, determine which category you want to apply for and ready your responses. You can look through the example applications, you can prepare everything. You're not able to log into the portal just yet, but you can get everything ready. And then third, it's important that you know that the application opens October 4th at 9 a.m. It's a first come, first serve program. So it's important that you have things ready to go and you are prompt with your application. So we are going to be putting the recording of this webinar, this PowerPoint up on our website. We'll have the example applications up for you to look at tomorrow on our website. But as always, if you've got more questions, there's a ton of information already on our website, including the recording of the first webinar, famemaine.com/thrive. You can also email the Thrive program at thrive@famemaine.com or call the Finance Authority of Maine for more questions. We are really looking forward to seeing all of your applications and good luck. Oh, and we will be answering all of the questions. I know there's a lot of questions. We'll be answering all of them and putting them up on the website as well as soon as we can answer and edit them all down. So good luck.